In this video, I'm going to take you through my top 3 takes for each team, and it's going to be focusing on the fantasy side of things, guys. Welcome back to the preseason for 2023 here, NRL Fantasy Analysis. It's great to be back. I was pretty antsy to get back into this, so we will get cranking. We've got the Broncos we're going to kick off with. I just went through the top 30 of each team in their squads, guys, and come up with 3 things. I'm going to start off with Carrigan. I think he's going to actually tie Payne Haas's average this year. So obviously Carrigan, a little bit lower than Payne on a regular basis, even the years that he was doing super well, getting those huge minutes. Haas has obviously had a couple of injuries last year, and he's picked up an ankle injury here in the preseason. And I think that Carrigan's a guy that is on the up. I think Payne Haas will probably start to level out his gameplay at the over this next couple of years as he moves slightly towards his peak there and his ceiling. So Carrigan, I think, has a little bit more to grow, and getting a bigger role in that Queensland team, I think that these two will be able to tie on the Broncos side of the ball. We see Reece Walsh move over to the Broncos, which is pretty exciting. And obviously coming from the Warriors there, where he wasn't able to perform at his best, as well as the Warriors not performing at their best either, which I hope this year, given they've got a full season at home, they'll be able to perform much better. But if we're looking at the Broncos here, Walsh comes into a better team, and I think he needs to show the world that he is actually an absolute superstar, because he showed that when he first went to the Warriors and then very much, fell off the wagon last year. He got dropped in a bunch of games, came off the bench in a bunch. His defense wasn't up to it, and I think that he can improve that, going to a better side here, and his attack will come out, and he'll be able to show that in this stage here. So I think he's going to be a staple in most teams. He's going to be fairly cheap, and I think he'll actually score pretty well across the season. Obviously make us some money, but actually be able to be a scorer in your back three there. And I think Cobbo is going to play really well, but I don't think he's going to provide the value on his starting price. So he had a bunch of games there. You saw him and Corey Oates go really, really well in the back end of last year, especially the second half. And I see Cobbo playing great. We saw what he did for Queensland. He was really, really good as well. But I can't see him improving too much on his scoring output, just because he's not a big runner of the footy. He's not a top cut type of player. A lot of these points are going to be scored through tries and line breaks, and I can see the Broncos, going probably as well as they did last year. They did fall away in the back end. I can see them being like a 7 to 10 type of team on the ladder. So I think Cobbo will do well, but not improve too much on that starting price. We have the Canberra Raiders. It's going to be a very interesting one this season there. So they do lose one of their middle boys in Adam Elliott. So I think this gives a few of their big boppers a bit of space. They've got Ryan Sutton, who's moving on, and Adam Elliott. So I think one of those guys is going to move to the middle. Not sure who that might be at this stage. You saw Elliott Whitehead playing a fair bit of middle. So I think that, with Hudson Young on one side, I think it leaves a bit of space for CHN on the other side there, Corey Harawira-Naera, for those that aren't sure. And welcome to everyone who's brand new to the channel in 2020, or back end of 2023 season. I'm very excited to have you all here, and I hope you learn a lot. But I think he's going to be worth purchasing. He's going to be a little bit underpriced, just based on the fact that he's had very limited minutes last year, and we've seen what he's been able to do in the past, and that score really, really well, and pick up lots of tries, lots of attacking stats, similar to what you saw of Hudson Young last year. And we'll speak about him in a sec, but Hudson Young managed to become super consistent last year, which CHM wasn't, minutes-wise and also output. So I think him possibly getting that spot, if that's given to him, I think he can really work his way into keeping that position long-term, getting better in the areas that he needs to, and being able to grind out a spot in that team long-term. And I think he's finally going to get that chance in this season, and will be in a lot of people's teams. Hudson Young, will he be a top-tier edge and be consistent? I think he will be. There was an interview I heard from him. He's speaking about how he felt like he'd really improved. He found his niche in the team. He found out what he needed to do, obviously be really aggressive, and that worked for him. So I can see him doing that again this year. I'd say he's a bit too big, too strong if we're going to play that way with him, and is smart enough to be able to get into the right positions to be able to achieve the success that he needs. He's got that consistent base, and then he has the ability to score lots of tries. So I think he can be a guy that could be really dominant on that left edge, and will be one of the top 3 to 5 edges this year in a team that I think is going to go pretty well, which we see here in point 3, with me saying here that all outside backs, I think you're going to get about a 5-point bump with the Raiders improving. They have a lot of good young players in their outside backs. Obviously, Kotrick has been the one that's been around a long time. You got Tomoko and these types of players, Sebastian Christ, who are really, really good young talent, and I think that they can come out and do a great job and probably get a bit of a 5-point bump and have stretches of 4 to 6 weeks across the season where they do really well, and there will be times where they have some low output, but that is the nature of outside backs. But I think Raiders, you saw them play really, really good in the second half. I think they can start a lot better and build into the season there. All right, the Bulldogs. So obviously a team that's going to be improving. They have Kickout coming over. They have also Reid Marnie. So plenty happening there. And if we're looking at that left edge, I think there's a space left from Aaron Schopp, who is doing really, really well as a strong young player. But whoever gets that position there on the left center, I think is going to do really well and probably have some value on their starting price, unless happen to get some older, more experienced player that is priced accordingly. If they get a youngster in there, you've got Burton, you've got Kickout, you've got him, whoever that's going to be, and then Adokar on that left edge. So I think that's going to be really cool for whoever gets that position. We've got Jackson Torpany and also Ryan Sutton. So I think either of those two guys, whoever gets that chance at a 4 weeks plus clip there and who's going to get big minutes, I think you need to jump on them straight away. Both those guys have an awesome PPM. You saw Sutton was having some issues with the Raiders, with Ricky Stewart last year, and was in and out of the starting lineup, on the bench, in and out of the team completely. If he gets big minutes, or Torpany, then I think they can both do great. But just be aware there are a lot of middles on that in that team now. They do bring over Kickout as well, so that's another forward there that could trouble those guys. But either one of them, if they get big minutes at some point through injuries or anything, you need to jump on them. Reid Marnie to go back to scoring well, as much as it pains me to say. This is going to be a little bit of an annoying one for me if he happens to go back to his best. If you were following along last year, for those that aren't new, obviously I had him for the majority of the year and he went poorly. I think Dogs are going to play a little bit differently to how Eels are going to play. Eels got getting early ball to Moses, to Brown, and using their edges with Papali'i, with Sean Lane, these types of players. I think Dogs will play a little bit different. Reedy should be tackling a little bit more than he was at the Eels, and I think he'll be able to do a little bit more out of dummy half. Probably a few kicks himself. With there not being a real clear 7 in that team, I think he's going to be able to have to control a bit through the middle, and obviously Burton will do his thing. So I think that's going to be interesting, and Reedy's going to get back to scoring super well. Move to the Sharks, guys, and really in this team, apart from Hines, I don't see any real relevant players to start with. Just on values, they obviously went really, really good as a team, and majority of the players had a great season as well. So a lot of them are either inflated or they're right on where they should be scoring for the rest of the year. I think it's really only going to come from injuries, to be honest with you, which is my number 3 point there. I think that's where the options will come up. Does Teague Wilton get an 80-minute role? Is there some options in the outside backs with Lockie Miller, with Cade Dykes? That's right. A few of these guys in the outside backs could potentially see some good minutes if there are injuries. And my second point there was just the fact that I think the best options will come from 4 to 6 week runs. We saw what happened with Talakai last year. We see what Ramian can do, Braden Hadlin-Ueli, Royce Hunt, these types of players. If they go up and down in price throughout the year, I think there's if they can get a good run there of lesser teams, or they start to hit form, they're the kind of guys that go for 4 to 6 week runs. And you'll see that across all the teams, guys, is that there are players that they can get on a bit of a roll. You saw Tarpany last year started getting on a bit of a roll and continued that throughout the rest of the season. And, sometimes they start off great the next season as well. Sometimes they go back to kind of where they were. So these are those types of players I think that could come out and do great. They could also have some lesser ones there. We're going to go through about half the teams. Obviously, with the Dolphins in now, we have odd teams, so it makes it harder to do that straight even there. And guys, if you're interested, it would be great if one of you can do that. By the end of the season, these are my really early takes. Obviously, this is the end of this middle of December here. So my early takes on the season and on fantasy output. So if you could check this out at the end of the year, and we'll do a little tick on each point and see how they played out. That would be really cool. All right, Dolphins, very interesting squad. Cool going through that 30 and trying to work out how this is going to shake out. And I think Kamisa is going to make money. He obviously spent a fair bit of time off the bench for the Cowboys last year. my team. Sad to see him leave, but it's good to see him get an opportunity. He just wasn't going to fit in apart from injuries in that Cowboys side. So he'll get his chance here, whether it's at the back, whether it's in the centers or on the wing. I think him getting 80 minutes each week, he will make money because he's super cheap and he has plenty of talent. So you'll have to do a fair bit for this side, and hopefully a lot of the experienced guys, the Bromwiches, Felice Kafusi, these types of guys can help there. And obviously you've got guys like O'Sullivan and Milford, and Cody Nicarima, these types of guys that are all pretty electric type of players that could hopefully get him some open space and score some tries. Number 2, very interesting one here is Jeremy Marshall-King, and I think he's going to do really, really well this year. I think he'll average 50 plus in this side. I think he's someone who's improving dramatically. Especially last year, he had a really, really good season and a great pickup from the Dolphins. One of their best, I would say, apart from getting the experience of Bromwiches, Kafusis, and these types of players. Marshall-King's one of their most important guys. And if he takes that next step at that number 9 position, I think the Dolphins can have a really solid season. O'Sullivan, I think he's going to do a lot for this team. You saw what he was able to do for Panthers, fantasy-wise, scoring really well, but doing a lot, obviously kicking game, controlling their game really well, and O'Sullivan's going to be super important, and I think he's going to have to do a lot for this team for them to do really well, which means I think he's going to be clearly averaging over 50 and will be a solid pickup, but there's just so many great halves. I just don't know if you could pick him up from the start. But again, he'll be someone that across the season, he could be a guy that's not going to play Origin that you might need to try and pick him up around there, after their bye or whenever that is, which we'll speak about with Scoop over the next few weeks. All right, let's move to Titans there. How many have we done so far? We've done a bunch there. Awesome. So move to Titans. We'll do a couple more, guys. I think Aaron Clark will get that 13 role, and having that tough end to the season with a couple of low scores, a little bit low at the start, some odd good games there at 9. I think he's going to get his chance at 13 to lock that down, with Tino moving hopefully into the 8 or the 10, the prop role there. Clarkie to get about 55 to 65 minutes there and score really well. So I think he's going to have some value. Good chance at the start of the season, but at least some point in that first few months. Sam Verrills, I think he's going to need to come in and do a fair bit of work in both attack and defense in this Titans side. You saw when he's with the Roosters, obviously the tackling's there, but a lot of his efforts is a little bit like Reid in terms of getting it out to guys. You're getting into the hands of Sammy Walker, Kiri, Tedesco, Manu, these types of players, and then getting into the edges. There's no real point of him doing too much out of the ordinary, which he did, thankfully get to play a lot of games last year. And I think this is the year that for him to really show what he did a bunch of years ago for the Roosters, obviously in a lesser side. I think he's going to have to do more, which just means more stats fantasy-wise. So I think he'll have a pretty solid season there for sure. And Fodawaker, I think it's time for him to bounce back. He had a pretty tough year last year. The year before, absolutely killed it. Got into that Queensland side and did really well. And I think Mofo will be able to bounce back in this side. Obviously, Titans needs to do pretty well, but it's going to be off the back of his efforts running the footy and tackling hard. Move to Manly, and I think we've got Kelma Tuolangi there, who comes over from the Tigers, and I think he's going to be used better in attack and have a little more luck. There was some games there where he ended up getting a head knock. He was doing pretty well, get a head knock. He got injured, and then he got moved to the bench and ended up finally getting an opportunity in that starting side and playing pretty well. But they just never gave him enough ball in attack, and he runs really, really hard. So I think the Titans hopefully will be able to use him a lot better. The main issue, Manly will be able to use him a lot better there. Hopefully on that left edge with Olakau'atu on the other. So I think hopefully they can. They don't have Foran anymore, but I think whoever plays in that 6th position can really get him plenty of ball and obviously score better than he did last year, because he definitely has some talent there, and I think he'll get a chance at some point. All right, Lockie Croker, I think he's going to improve again and have a larger role in attack. So he started to build throughout the season last year. Started a little bit slow over the last couple of years and has really blossomed into a really good 9 actually. So coming from the halves, he's moved into the 9 position over the last year or so and has really improved. I think he's going to score pretty well and average close to 50 this year, which gives him a tiny bit of value. But really, I just think that we'll see some improvement from him. And at some point, he's going to be a really, really important player in a bunch of fantasy sides, and he might propel a lot of those good teams to do really well. Okay. I actually did this the other day. Tommy to be available most of the year. I think he's literally, just as I'm doing this video, has just picked up a little bit of a bit of a hamstring injury. So hopefully it's okay and he'll be back on the park, ready for the start of the season. But surely, so many injuries. It's time. Yeah, that cracking year 2 years ago. let's hope that he's going to be back and playing the rest of the year. But not a good start in this preseason, that's for sure. So hopefully he's kind of clear and ready to go, sort of February, and he can get 4 to 6 weeks ready to go, and then back for round one. We'll find out more about that by the time this video comes out, I'd say. Okay, let's go through these last two here, the Stormers. So I think Christian Welch is going to be in need of a bigger role, whether that's a couple extra minutes, whether that's more runs, more defense. He's coming off a big injury, so that's my slight concern if you're looking to pick him up round one. But with both Bromwich's gone, with Felice Kafusi gone, there's going to be a real need for some of these Storm guys to really step up, these middles. So expecting Welch to have a bigger role. It's probably 5 extra points. He's obviously the offload king. He did pretty well for the start of the season before, and I think he can do a great job this year. Hopefully he has a full year on the park. The Storm need him, otherwise they're pretty much no chance of winning this comp. And I think Josh King's going to get big minutes, because they just don't have those type of players. Harry Grant, I think he's going to be the highest hooker average this year. I'm expecting a slight drop from Cook, just a slight one, but we'll talk about that in the Bunnies section there. But I think Harry Grant will need to do a lot. Think of what he did for the Tigers a couple of years ago. I think he's going to have to be pretty similar this year for the Storm, with a lot of their big guns not there anymore. They're going to be relying heavily on Money Munster, Grant, Hughesy, and Pap, and obviously a few of their middles in Welch and stuff. But I think Grant's going to have to do a lot out of dummy half. No Brandon Smith there. It is his team now, and I think it is time for him to be the highest averaging hooker, which I know a lot of people will agree or be wanting to see that because they love watching him play. We've got Alicia Katoa and also Trent Liero, who I think are going to be playing super important roles. Liero was already there, but Katoa comes over, and I think this is the exact team that he needs to really show his potential. He's absolute superstar with the ball in hand, a bit of a guy that can score great tries. And I think both of those guys, Liero, we've seen some glimpses of him, of being able to do really well. And when he gets big minutes, he can do a great job. And I think both of those guys, my assumption is that they will get the edge positions, and I think that they'll be able to do awesome work here for the Storm, and they're going to be needed if the Storm want to play well. Again, they could flop, and the Storm don't play incredibly well. But I think they're super important in this squad. And the last one we'll talk about in today's video, guys, thank you so much for sticking around. It would be great if you could subscribe if you are new to this channel. But Knights, I think Hastings is going to be a big scorer this year. He showed so many glimpses of being a superstar fantasy scorer last year. Then he hurt his foot. And you just listen to some podcasts when he's there talking to a guru. He knows so much about the game. He studies well. He's just someone who's going to get better and better each and every year until he hits sort of his prime hits past his prime in the next year or two. So I think he's probably got one more year or two of playing at his best. And I think for the Knights, he's going to have to do a lot. Whether Ponga moves to 6 or they play someone else there, Hastings is going to be the guy. And if Knights are going to do any well, Hastings has to do a lot. You saw him able to score really well in a Tigers team, which wasn't great, to be honest. So Knights are going to be the same, unfortunately. And I think that he's going to do a great job. Number 2, we're going to need Adam Elliott or Dan Saifidi to play big middle minutes. So whichever one we get some news on is going to do it. I think one at least will play huge minutes, but could be both. They could be both 60-point scorers, but Dan Saifidi didn't play as well last year like he did the year before. Very similar to Mo Fodawaker there. So I think either of them or both could be really, really good. And the last one, I think Jaden Brayley and Ponga are going to improve. Brayley's obviously coming off the injury. He started to improve in the back end and getting good scores, but I think he can be a 50-point scorer again. We saw what he did a couple of years ago. And also I think Ponga is going to improve. He has to. He didn't score very well at all last year. I think he's going to be in a lot of teams to start. Let's hope that Hastings can bring the best out of him. We haven't heard a lot of great things out of Newcastle over the last few years. Obviously, there's been a few scandals as well. There's been a little bit of chat about his work ethic. Obviously, super talented, but him and a lot of the other players in the Knights and their work ethic. So, for people that are living in Newcastle, they see these guys regularly, and it's like, oh, what are they doing at this time? What are they doing here? When yes, they can have a little bit of fun, but it sounds like it's a little bit too much for a player and a team that is struggling and has big boots to fill. To be honest with you, but that's the Knights there, guys, and I hope you enjoyed that one. That's going to be the end of this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.